1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Is it on? Good. Everybody set? All right. Say a few things, and then you can fire away. Obviously, great news here today. A big thanks to the employees and the leadership here at Kimberly-Clark. We couldn't be more pleased, and as I've said now for quite some time, if it's literally the last thing, it won't be the last thing, but if it's the last thing I do, we wanted to make sure we could put a deal on the table that would preserve the nearly 400 jobs, good-paying, family-supporting jobs here at this plant at Kimberly-Clark. The deal that we put on the table that will do just that through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and a big hat tip to Mark Hogan and the entire team who's worked on that here from WDC, is $28 million spread out over 5 years. It's broken up into pieces. A portion of that is about maintaining the workforce, so that's 388 jobs right here, right now, keeping those in play. It's keeping the footprint that exists in the state of Wisconsin, so that's roughly a little over 2,400 jobs in the state of Wisconsin they have to keep for the next 5 years, the duration of the package on the table. In addition, they're making an up to $200 million investment in a large-scale expansion. And so a portion of this deal ties directly into that expansion. It's tied in percentage-wise, as we've done with other deals out there. But that capital expenditure is a big part, not only our deal, it's a big part of, as I mentioned to the employees, about reinforcing this isn't just short-term, this is a long-term decision. They're making a firm capital investment and expansion of operations physically here at this site. And so that's good news into the future. It ties into what I've repeatedly said, that this is not a paper mill, this is not a dying industry. They're making consumer goods here like Depends and Kotex and others, that particularly when it comes to Depends, with an aging population here and around the world, that's a growing part of the marketplace, not only for Kimberly-Clark, but for the industry as a whole. So that kind of investment here shows that they're making their investment here in a part of the industry that's growing. It's advanced manufacturing. It's far different than people traditionally think of an old paper mill. This is a consumer goods, high-tech, highly advanced site, and they'll be expanding that. So it's employees, it's expansion, and the third key part ties into supply chain. We tied that into roughly $56 million they'll be doing over the duration of our term with over 200 different companies across the state. As we talked about this over the last few months, that was a key component as well. It wasn't just the jobs at this site or just here in this region. It was all the other jobs and all the other families affected at those 200-some businesses across the state of Wisconsin. So we couldn't be more pleased. But for me, not just talking to employees that were here, but touring in as I've done before, I mentioned specifically Jacob was one of the many employees I met, but probably the one that moved me the most. When I heard him get choked up and talk about having 5 kids, his wife today is at home, pregnant with another child. He talked about just what an immense, as he said, it was really an early Christmas for them because this has been extremely stressful, understandably so, for not just the employees, but for everyone involved going through this process. And that's why we're so appreciative from the senior leadership, the board of directors, plant management, everybody else who's been willing to listen to our ideas and our offers. We started out down a legislative path. We got great community support from local leaders, business leaders, community leaders, civic leaders, and others. We started working on earlier this summer on a parallel track so that no matter what happened with the legislative approach, WDC was prepared to work on alternatives. So this didn't just start on November 7th. And I could not be more thrilled to be here today. And for me, obviously, I appreciate talking to you all about this and taking questions. But most important for me was going around the plant again just to see the impact that this has on those employees. The only thing more exciting to that would be following them home tonight to see what the response is going to be from their families, because this is something that they've gone through a lot of stress on. But one of the great benefits, as I mentioned to them, because I remember talking to Tom Falk and others about this, a big worry early on in the process that there might be an abandonment, that you might just have a huge wave of people leave. A lot of folks said, hey, it's a good economy. We got the lowest unemployment rate this year we've ever had, more people working this year than ever before. It would have been easy to just flee to go to other employers. But this team of people overwhelmingly was committed to this company and to this factory. Their staying here helped make the case to the management. And then, of course, we were able to offer this alternative to the legislative package that got the job done. So couldn't be more pleased. And to me, as I mentioned, when I think about legacy, these are the sorts of things that leave a legacy. And I wanted to be here today, not only to talk about it, but really to share with the employees, to celebrate with the employees and management of Kimberly-Clark, who really together have done a phenomenal job. And we're happy the state's been able to play a part in it.
Governor, now that this is done, what's the status of the land trust bills? I mean, do you plan to start signing those right away? Have you gotten the bills sent to your office yet?
I'll take a look at it probably starting later today and tomorrow. Obviously we've been talking about bits and pieces. You heard me talk about the criteria the other day. But for me, it's really, today I just want to get through this. Today, this was the key marker. I would push everything else off my table to get this done. And so I'll spend some more time weighing all that. But this was infinitely more important than some minor tweaks to the state statutes. This is about real jobs and real people. This directly ties into twofold. Ties into keeping the close to 400 jobs that are here, and it keeps the footprint that they have with a percentage tied into that. So it's exactly, I believe, 2,418 jobs are what's written into the contract. They have to keep that here, but I'll let Kimberly-Clark talk about their other components. But our focus all along had really been about this plant and these operations here, not only for the employees, but because we understood that this was the most viable part of their operations, and this is a strong and growing part of the consumer market.
Why didn't you suggest this back in February when it was clear that the Senate was not going to support the original?
Well, we started working in the summer on other options, but at that point they were really focused on the package we laid on the table. Remember, I think in credit to the leadership, they never originally came to us. They made a decision based on the numbers and looked at it, and that original decision, they didn't come to us. They didn't pit one state against the other. A lot of companies do that. They did not do that. They just made a decision based on the logical information they had at the time. We made a plea and reached out to the legislature, as we often do on other things. We like to work together and not just go solo. So we worked with the legislature and said, boy, if we put this on the table, could we get some support for that from the folks here locally? There was good support. And so we put that on the table. But as there is any time you've got a new piece of legislation, there was uncertainty there. So we tried to get through the legislative process. That was the easiest, most obvious sense. Kimberly-Clark's management, to their credit, said we weren't looking for this, we weren't asking for this, but you make such a compelling, not just case, you put such a compelling deal on the table. They said, we'll give you the time, see what you can do on this. Many steps along the way, I believe many other companies around the world would have pulled the plug and said, no, time's up. But I give them real credit to being sincerely interested in trying to help keep Kimberly-Clark here and keep these jobs here. And so we've been running that parallel, but when we exhausted our other options, again, it's on a different time frame than the legislative passage was, but it does have what we wanted, which was keeping the jobs, keeping them long-term, and having them make a significant capital investment, which I think is a good sign for the future.
What concessions are workers giving up on this?
I'll let Dave and the folks from the union talk about it, but it's parallel to what they've talked about before. I mean, that's why I give them credit, not only the employees, but the union. Everybody came together and said, what do we need to do to save these jobs? And so we felt the state had a role in that. The union leadership has a role in that. Management had a role in that. They all came together. And to me, this is a triumph. This is when people go through challenges like this, what they want is people not walking away from the table. We were constantly together at the table trying to figure out what we could do, how we could do it in different ways. And in the end, we found success. Because if your ultimate goal is let's figure out a way to get this done, then you can go through a number of variations of it. But again, I give credit to everybody. The employees, the union, the management, the community, and obviously our state team, both elected and appointed.
And this is a done deal? The legislature doesn't need to sign off on
Nope.
this?
Nope. This is the same way we've operated under the last 8 years, same rules.
But under future legislation, it is proposed that this would have to go through the Joint Finance Committee. Is that a good practice for future deals? And if so, why not put this one before?
Because we operate under the law. The law we operated for 8 years. If I was the governor for the next 4 years, I'd have no problem. like I've done on many a deal, I don't do things without involving the legislature. So I do think it makes sense. If you're going to do, the whole reason we created the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation was to get greater involvement and interest in economic development. 8 years ago, we'd lost 133,000 jobs. We had, early in 2010, 9.3% unemployment. We had graduates leaving the state. And a big chunk of why we created the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation was to get greater buy-in for economic development. When I was first elected governor, I could appoint directly to the Department of Commerce as secretary. I changed the law working with the legislature to involve a board that included not only my appointees, but appointees of the legislature, and the reason for that was simple. I wanted the legislature to buy into economic development. That's why there are both Democrat and Republican members on the board of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. You cannot do economic development alone. You have to have buy-in from both parties and from multiple branches of government. That's why we created the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. So if I had more time, if I was around for 4 more years, I'd have no problem working with the Joint Finance Committee or any other committee. There's no doubt in my mind a good deal like this would garner great support.
Sir, one of the lame duck bills suggests that if your future successor takes over, do you find it fair if they would be able to pass they would not be able to pass a tax incentive package like this one? Do you think that that's fair if they come into office with that red tape already done?
They absolutely would be able to pass a package like this. There's no doubt about it. They just have to have buy-in from everybody, which is what we do. We get buy-in from everybody. Right now, I don't know of anybody who's objecting to this proposal. If anybody's against this, I've yet to hear about it. They might be using it for other political purposes to make points on it, but in terms of this deal for these employees, for the impact on this community and the state, I think it's pretty universal. People believe this is a good thing. And this is the sort of thing that can be done in the future. It just has to have buy-in from a broad group of people like we did. We got buy-in from the legislature. We got buy-in from local officials. We got buy-in from the union. We got buy-in from the employees. We got buy-in from the management. This is a total team effort. And to me, it's a good example of what we should be doing, no matter who's in office, not just in the next few years, but for the next 20, 30, 40 years ahead. When it comes to economic development, it should not be a partisan issue. It should not be a political issue. It should be about keeping good-paying, family-supporting jobs in our communities, and that's exactly what this deal does.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.